First, we go to South Sudan, where new evidence is emerging of alleged ethnic killings committed during more than a week of fighting. The United Nations says it has discovered a mass grave in Bentiu, in the oil-rich Unity State, that contained about 75 bodies. There are reportedly at least 2 other mass graves in the capital city of Juba. A reporter in Juba quoted witnesses as saying more than 200 people, mostly ethnic Nuers, had been shot by security forces. Victims have told reporters and aid workers that Dinka gunmen were shooting people in Nuer districts who did not speak the Dinka language. A BBC journalist interviewed a man named Simon who said he was shot 4 times but managed to survive a mass killing by hiding under dead bodies. Now, the violence follows a power struggle between President Salva Kiir, an ethnic Dinka, and his Nuer ex-deputy Riek Machar. The fighting first erupted in Juba last week and has spread throughout South Sudan, with rebels supporting Machar seizing the major towns of Bor and Bentiu, north of the capital. Kiir fired Machar in July and has accused his former deputy of plotting a coup. But Machar denies he's trying to seize power, and the government has denied it is behind any ethnic violence. Now, the fear is that the personal rivalry between the former allies will spark a full-scale civil war between the Nuer and Dinka groups. On Monday, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon addressed the General Assembly and asked for more peacekeepers to be sent to South Sudan and sent this message to the country's leaders.
Let me be absolutely clear. The world is watching all sides in South Sudan. Attacks on civilians and the UN peacekeepers deployed to protect them must cease immediately. The United Nations will investigate reports of grave human rights violations and crimes against humanity. Those responsible at the senior level will be held personally accountable and face the consequences.
Also on Monday, about 150 U.S. Marines moved from Spain to Djibouti, poised to help evacuate Americans and provide security for the U.S. Embassy. Joining us now to discuss this is Magdi El-Ghazouli, Rift Valley Institute Fellow and blogger at Still Sudan. Magdi, thanks for joining us. It's been difficult to watch what's happening in South Sudan, and also difficult to get an official body count, as well as verified information. What are the major barriers to this now, in your understanding?
Thanks very much for having me. The major barrier to this, I suppose, is that most of the fighting is taking place in the countryside, so outside the reach of your regular UN observer. And the numbers you're citing, of course, are limited to what UN peacekeepers or journalists can pick up. But outside this immediate terrain, it's very unlikely that anybody would establish with the harder facts how many people were killed or under which conditions.
And you know, Magdi, when we talk about what can be done at this point to try and contain the violence and prevent any sort of civil war, you know, we heard Ban Ki-moon talk about sending more peacekeeping troops. How much can they actually do at this point, in your opinion, just based on you know, history?
Well, based on history, of course, there's very little they can do. I mean, what you need now is political pressure, and pressure for a political deal. And of course, you need a bit less of this Dinka and Nuer essentialization in coverage, because this seems to somehow feed into the fear and the suspicion and the anger of the populations who are currently involved in this debacle, which is essentially, as you well described, is a political struggle, not an ethnic one. The fact that reporting is very focused on the Dinka-Nuer rivalry sort of amplifies this into a civil war. I mean, until now, technically it's a power struggle, there's a mutiny, but it's not populations are fighting each other. This might not be the case in a few weeks if you continue discussing the war in terms of Dinka-Nuer rivalry. The pressure you need now is to bring Salva Kiir and Machar to reach a deal. There are no good guys and no bad guys in this. This is sort of an operation mode of politics in South Sudan. There's nothing new. History of mutinies and revolts in South Sudan is very long.
Right.
And dates back to 1955. This is an operation mode. The atrocities, the human rights atrocities, of course, it's very logical to condemn them and totally justified to condemn them. But to stop them, you need a political settlement.
And you know, Magdi, I'm looking at actually some of the tweets that you've been retweeting as well as what other people are talking about. I just want to draw your attention first to this one. Max Fisher saying South Sudan is falling into civil war. Sadly, it was probably inevitable. And here's why, linking to a Washington Post piece. Do you agree that this was inevitable? Can you answer why this is happening?
I'm not sure if it's inevitable. I don't think it's inevitable. It's an implosion of the political order that followed in South Sudan after the CPA, the 2005 peace agreement that brought the long civil war between North and South to an end. This peace agreement was focused wholly on ending the civil war between North Sudan and South Sudan. It had very little to say about political arrangements inside South Sudan, or also inside what is now Sudan. And therefore, in Sudan, we saw the second phase of the rebellion in South Sudan and the Blue Nile and the central government, and sort of a side effect of the failure of the CPA to address these issues. In South Sudan, we're seeing now the implosion of the sort of alliance that allowed South Sudan to gain independence on the basis of the referendum,
right.
On the grounds of a rivalry that dates back to 1991. But all this is political. This is neither ethnic nor military in any sense. These are political arrangements. And if you think now, for the past few months, there has been quite a lot of political struggle at the high ups of the SPLM about who would be the candidate for the chairmanship, who would be standing for the next presidency, and so on.
Yeah, and it seems like the political infighting is just coming to a head now. Of course, it's been years in the making, people would argue, and I want to thank you for joining us. I do also want to leave our viewers with these two tidbits. Rania Khalek, quoting from Bloomberg, Japan will supply 10,000 bullets for UN peacekeeping operations in South Sudan, and one about the oil. South Sudan oil minister telling Reuters the Unity State oil fields, as we reported, have been shut down. That means output falls from 245,000 barrels per day to 200,000 barrels per day.